I took 25 milligrams of Enclomiphene every day for 50 days, taking blood tests before and after. And in this video, I'm going to talk about all those things, as well as why I decided to start taking it, and tell you about the changes that I'm making after the 50th day. But first, run the disclaimer. Enclomiphene, or Enclo for short, it's not a peptide or a steroid. It's a synthetic small molecule organic compound, and it's a drug used off-label for medicinal purposes. It's not a supplement, and it's not a simple test booster. Enclo is commonly given in pill form as a tablet or capsule. It's often sold at TRT clinics as an oral alternative to exogenous testosterone injections, creams, pellets, or orals to treat low T symptoms or to enhance fertility. It's typically used to increase the amount of total testosterone in the body for 3 reasons. Number 1, the treatment of secondary hypogonadism, where the signal from the brain to the testes is reduced or hampered in some capacity, and it's typically by men who experience low T symptoms. Number 2, as post-cycle therapy or PCT for restarting follicle-stimulating hormone production in the testicles so the body can start producing testosterone again. This is for men who come off TRT and steroid cycles. And number 3, for improving male and female fertility. For men, it would be long-term usage, but for women, it could be used at most for a few days early in the follicular stage, though letrozole is preferred from my research. And again, I'm not telling anyone to use Enclo or how to use it, where to get it from, etc. But I want you to understand its real-world application by others. Where this gets interesting is how Enclo raises testosterone. As a SERM, it binds to estrogen receptors in the central nervous system, tricking the brain into thinking estrogen is low, so the body produces more testosterone. It actually increases the amount of estrogen produced in the body as well, but the competition in the brain ends up lowering estrogen usage in there. So you get a mismatch between real estrogen in the blood and at the receptor sites in the rest of your body compared to the estrogen usage in your brain. And this can cause side effects and create a condition where you have a mix of high and low estrogen effects. But it doesn't stop there. It increases the use of a transport protein called SHBG. Enclomiphene raises sex hormone binding globulin, which actually reduces the amount of free or available testosterone in the body, even though total test is increased. So there's a second mismatch in terms of side effects and symptomology between total and free testosterone, where you might experience some high T effects and some low T effects. Lastly, Enclo can also reduce the amount of IGF-1 that the body produces from growth hormone in the body. That can actually reduce the effectiveness of the extra testosterone produced by Enclo in the first place. But the bottom line is, we know Enclomiphene works to raise testosterone. It also raises other downstream sex hormones proportionally, like DHT and estrogen, and it elevates SHBG, but it can lower IGF-1. This makes blood work absolutely critical. So I had labs done before I started Enclo and then after taking it for 50 days. Now, I paid out of pocket for my labs, and I was reimbursed by my health savings account provider. In my subsequent labs that I got later that I paid for, I was actually able to use my credit card from my HSA, FSA provider, that they sent me. And I used a company called Private MD Labs, and while they are not a sponsor and I'm not affiliated with them in any way, because I used them, their customer portal generated a referral link for me that I can essentially post and give to others that you can click on to save $200 in lab fees if you choose to use it with them. I'm going to leave that link in the description below. If you use that link, I'll actually get labs cheaper with them in the future, which means I can run more tests when I get more blood work. So I would appreciate you using it if you go with them. But otherwise, they're not a sponsor. And that's my little plug here, is just so that I can maybe afford to do more of these in the future. So why did I decide to take Enclo? Well, for the last year or more, I've been experiencing low T symptoms like unexplained fatigue and low energy. So I've basically had persistent tiredness that doesn't improve with adequate sleep. And I haven't had a lot of adequate sleep. Another thing is mood shifts and reduced motivation. I've had a lot of emotional changes in the last few years, such as irritability, some mild depression, and a lack of drive and enthusiasm, and I'm trying to essentially combat that. I've had brain fog and focus issues as well. So I've had difficulty concentrating, I've had more memory lapses, and I don't think it's just because I'm getting older, and I've had a lot of reduced mental clarity. And of course the big one, sleep disturbances. I've had poor sleep quality, and I've had some night sweats and disrupted sleep patterns. That's something I've been dealing with for over 10 years, and I've spent a decade or more building in a lot of lifestyle habits and making changes to combat that, but there's a limit in terms of what I can do, and ultimately my body has fought that. So I think there are biological issues that I'm dealing with causing some of these symptoms. And last but not least, as you can probably tell from a lot of my videos, I essentially have poor body composition. Even though I'm relatively lean, I have low lean mass, and in particular, not a lot of muscle. So I've become really weak the last few years, despite being physically very active. I haven't had low libido, but it's not the same as it was even a decade ago. But ultimately, I'm doing this to improve my health. I did a lot of research. I ordered a bottle online, and then I created a dose schedule that would give me enough time to evaluate it. And I decided to take 25 milligrams daily, which is a high dose, just to see if I could feel Enclo moving the needle for me. If I notice any negative symptoms, I would just reduce the dose in half, or I would just stop completely. I'm not married to the idea that I have to use this, but I want to at least try it out. But the long story short is I didn't want to try a low dose, not notice anything, and then worry about titrating up or have this long delay for feeling an effect. I wanted to feel it relatively soon and then adapt to it as the circumstances presented itself. Now let's take a look at the lab results from before and after my 50-day experiment, and then I'll walk you through the symptoms that I experienced with these results in mind. Here's what my labs were before and after taking Enclo. So as you can see, my total T was 513 before and then 644 after. That's an increase of 25%. My free T went from 84.9 to 128, which is a 51% increase, and I had to use the Vermeulen formula to be consistent between the before and after. And then the other test that was consistent between the two was SHBG. I started at 45.8 and I went down to 36, and that was a 21% decrease. I was actually surprised by that. And I want to point out one more thing in my test results. You notice a little bit lower that I tested for IGF-1 in the second test, and my IGF-1 level was 160. And at the time, I was taking a peptide called CJC Nodac in a blend with another peptide called ipamorelin, and each of them were dosed at approximately 166 micrograms per night. And I believe that was more than enough to counter any sort of reduction in IGF-1 that Enclo would have created. And the good news is these test results show that I'm not hypogonadal, and that means I do not need to get on TRT. However, in my baseline labs, my primary care physician only ran total testosterone, SHBG, and then a CMP, a complete metabolic panel, which included albumin, so I was able to calculate the free testosterone value based on that. He also didn't include estradiol, which at the time I didn't understand why, but in hindsight and a lot of research, I realized it's not really needed. You know, I've never had gyno and I've been lean most of my life, so I'm not really worried about that. And for the follow-up labs in May, I made sure to add free testosterone as well as estradiol and IGF-1 because I was going to use those going forward. Additionally, I added progesterone and prolactin. Those are two other sex-based hormones, and while I don't think they were needed, I personally wanted to satisfy my curiosity and see where I was at with those markers. In subsequent blood work after that one, I do not take those tests. But you can clearly see an improvement in all three values. Total and free T went up, and SHBG went down. And I believe those are due to fluctuations that are influenced by the lifestyle factors like nutrition and insulin levels, not just the medication itself. So I want to be clear that Enclo did not lower my SHBG, and I also think it's possible that the clearance time of that is quicker too. In other words, it may rise higher and then maybe it'll clear quicker. Now let me put these lab results in context. I take Enclo every morning without fail at 6 a.m. Additionally, my labs are always taken at exactly 9 a.m. However, I did not take Enclo the morning before the second test. So the last time I took it was the morning before, roughly 27 hours previously. So these results are not the same as if I would have taken Enclo that same morning, only 3 hours previously. That's very important. And to be honest with you, at the time I didn't realize the sheer time difference between my last dose of Enclo and the test on the next day. So I originally thought my body's response to Enclo was reduced, but I did eventually figure out there was a 27-hour delay, and that basically helped inform me to make decisions going forward. In my next video, I do take Enclo the same morning of the test as I wanted to see the peak value at that time. But these numbers are effectively trough values. So that's why the changes from before and after aren't dramatic, though they are still very significant. And one takeaway from this results is that my lowered SHBG flies in the face of conventional knowledge that Enclo raises it. Though, spoiler alert, in the next video you're going to see, it does go in the other direction. And I'm going to talk about this more in that video. But now I know my baseline hormone values for estrogen, progesterone, prolactin, and IGF-1 for future reference when needed. Last but not least, let me tell you how it felt taking Enclo for 50 days at a high value of 25 milligrams daily. To be honest, I didn't feel much better. I attribute that to the paradox effects that I experienced with both testosterone and estrogen. That's not to say that I didn't notice benefits, they just weren't great. Here are the beneficial effects that I did notice. Number one, I started getting morning wood a lot more often, most mornings. I don't have ED, but it did make me realize that this hadn't happened in a long time. Number two, there were some days I felt more masculine, more of a command and conquer type of feeling, and that was actually kind of cool. Number three, I noticed less energy drops over time. That's very important to me, and that's different than feeling sleepy or sedated. Just the feeling of being wiped out was less frequent over time, and it wasn't as heavy an experience. Now let's talk about the detrimental effects. There were none that I could tell. I didn't notice any of my symptoms get worse, so I had nothing that I would consider side effects. That said, I saw my estrogen results in the second test. They're elevated, out of range, and that actually scared me a little bit, because I'm not used to that. Like, I never would have figured that I have high estrogen, considering I'm relatively lean. But I did extensive research and I realized that the elevated estrogen serum level was still in a decent ratio compared to the total testosterone serum level. So I basically, the red alert went away. I was just fine after that. And to be honest, I didn't notice anything like gyno or emotionalism at the time, so I basically didn't worry about it from that point going forward. But I was glad to stop Enclo for a week or so before coming back to it and reducing the dose in half for my second experiment and adding some supplements to help improve that T to E ratio. Now let's talk about what I didn't notice. There was no honeymoon period. I never had a period of time where I felt elevated, more than normal, and I realize the labs don't show a great increase because of the trough values, and I think that's a lesson with fast clearing orals. I already know what lowered T values look like. I came into this, feeling these low T symptoms, so at this point, I became more interested in the whole symptomology side of things than the numbers per se, although I did want to see what the numbers would look like in future tests. But the bottom line, when you're dealing with these fast-clearing oral tablets or capsules, taking blood work a day or more later just doesn't show up as much, and that's a lesson I learned, and I'm just passing that information along to you. I think the trough values have a lot more importance if you're on a steroid cycle or on TRT and you're using long-acting esters and there's a rise and fall that takes place over days. With orals, you get up and down within the span of a day, and usually the half-life is just a number of hours. The second thing I want to mention is my sleep didn't improve, not one bit. And I had already been going through a washout period previously before I started this of antihistamine-based over-the-counter sleep aids from Walmart and Kroger's. But Enclo didn't make an impact whatsoever with these compounds, and eventually I got through that washout period just fine. My sleep got better, but just to be honest with you, I can't say that Enclo helped at all. It's a lifestyle factor that I'm dealing with, and maybe a biological factor that I'm just going to need more research on. And let's be honest, no one buys Enclo for insomnia or for sleep-related issues. That's not an indication that it's for, off-label or otherwise. And lastly, another thing I didn't notice was eye floaters or any sort of vision issues. I think that's really more due to Clomid and Enclomiphene and all that kind of stuff. That's something you can look at in other videos to really get a lot of details on that. But long story short, I didn't really experience any issues or notice anything that I expected to notice. So what are my conclusions? I think Enclomiphene is best suited for fertility purposes, like treating secondary hypogonadism or as a post-cycle therapy for men coming off TRT or a steroid cycle. But subjectively, I just didn't feel any sort of a stimulant or a dopaminergic response. And while it could theoretically help build muscle by raising total T, you have to factor in that dip in IGF-1 that promotes the muscle building that often comes with SERMs. And you have to deal with the increased SHBG that captures more total T and gives you less free T to act on the skeletal muscle tissue. So that's why I think it's a little bit of a mixed bag. So I can't say Enclomiphene noticeably improved or boosted my gym performance, though I do think it helped preserve my muscle a little bit while I was taking it. I just don't think it made a big difference, especially since I was so wiped out and I couldn't go to the gym often. I was really just going to the gym to get on the treadmill, and if I had enough energy, I would try to do some weight training. but honestly, the washout period kind of wrecked me on that front, and I stopped going to the gym pretty regularly because of that. I'm in better shape now, but that's for another story. I do think Enclo has potential if it drives your testosterone high enough, but if SHBG rises along with it and blunts your free T, the net benefit, I just think, might end up being a wash. For me, the jury's still out more than 50 days later. With all that said, it's time to wrap up this video. In the next episode, I make a few key adjustments to see how my body responds to Enclomiphene moving forward. I cut the dose in half to 12.5 milligrams daily to see if I get a better response and lower those estrogen numbers. I add a supplement stack using Enhanced Labs, Black Ox, and Blue Ox to see if natural testosterone and free T boosters make a difference alongside Enclo. And I test my peak hormone levels exactly 3 hours after dosing, so we see what the absolute highest values look like compared to these trough results. So I have a question for you. Those of you who have taken Enclomiphene, why did you decide to take it, and what was your experience with it? Let me know in the comments below. For me, it was low T symptoms, and I don't think it resolved it greatly, but I do think it helped somewhat, and it kind of raised the floor for me to where the lowest of the lows I didn't experience any longer, and that I think was valuable. Well, that's going to do it for this video. Please like and subscribe. Comment if you have any questions for me. Maybe I can try to answer and tell you more about my experience. So definitely subscribe to the channel and come back to watch that next video. It's going to be a fun one with a lot more interesting information coming from that. Thank you very much for watching, and have a great day.